Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rant Podcast, episode number 002. I'm your host, Nick Callahan. It is January 14th, 2015, and holy cow, the world is going nuts. We're 2 weeks into 2015, and how many people were killed in the name of religious extremism? We're going to be going right into that, along with some other topics. We're going to go into Charlie Hebdo. We are going to go into the Boko Haram of massacres of Nigeria. We might even go into, hey, look at this, a little good news from Obama, as well as some not so good news over in Ukraine that maybe further speaks into what we covered in the first episode of the Rant Podcast, episode number 001, where we talked about HR 758. So all that and a little bit more in this week's half-hour news roundup. Settle on in and settle on down, baby, because here we go with the Rant Podcast. All right, Charlie Hebdo, obviously a massive headline, and still is a massive headline today from those attacks in France. And I know most of you guys are going to be kind of up. You're going to be up, air quote, so to speak, on some of these issues and who and what Charlie Hebdo was. So forgive me, but for the people that aren't aware of those things, Charlie Hebdo was a weekly satirical newspaper and fairly anti-religion and left-wing type of publication that was attacked by Muslim extremists last week, where 12 people were killed and 11 were injured. The French publication created columns and illustrations that showed an outside perspective on political leaders and celebrities and, of course, religious leaders and the religious organizations and the deities, prophets, or holy books that they believed in. And the report said that there were three of these Muslim extremists. And these guys just went in. There's a video. Some of you seen it, some of you haven't. I don't know if we'll post the video, but it is out there on YouTube, where you could see they're just all dressed in all black, ski masks on, the whole nine, and they're walking in right down the street with assault rifles. And at the time of the video, I don't know if this was already after the massacre and they were making their way out, but these guys pretty much went in and shot everyone that they could find, killing 12, 11 injured. And then they got out of the building after the massacre and shot their way down the street and stole a Renault Clio, a car. They stole a car to get away with. And then there was one of them that holed up in a kosher grocery store with hostages, and there was another one, the other two made their way into a printing facility where they also held hostages. And what the French police did, I imagine, with the help of some intelligence, was they embarked on simultaneous raids for both places. And all of the suspects in the Charlie Hebdo attacks are now deceased. They killed them all. So if that isn't a big old fat dose of karma or justice or whatever you would like to call it, I don't know what is. The unfortunate thing is that in those raids, 4 of those hostages did lose their lives. I think that's something that needs to, severely be looked at and questioned, is the religious intentions of some of these extremists. We see in the video that I was just mentioning that you could hear him screaming, "Praise Allah." He was saying, while killing people, he was saying, protect Muhammad and avenge the Prophet and things of that nature. So the religious intent and motivation behind those killings That's not speculation. I mean, that's cold hard fact. They were killing in the name of their prophet and their religion and whatever gods, their holy books that they choose to subscribe to. And speaking of religious intent, get this one. You want to share a laugh with me? So, there's this guy. His name's Bill Donahue, and he's pretty much a mouthpiece for this Catholic League. And he pretty much, in essence, tried to justify the killings and was saying, and I'm not quoting him quite yet, but he was saying pretty much that they were validated because Charlie Hebdo brought it on themselves. So here we have this Catholic League mouthpiece, Bill Donahue. Now he's also attacking the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression that Charlie Hebdo so proudly expressed in their own way. It's really, I mean, as far as, not obviously as far as being a French satirical publication by any way, but it's not much different than what I'm doing right now. Kind of voicing information and drawing opinions and conclusions and things like that. That's freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. You know, it ain't illegal yet. Why don't you enjoy it? But you have this Catholic League mouthpiece, Bill Donahue. Now he's attacking them too, and saying that these things were validated because of the narcissistic nature of the publication itself, the cartoons and characters and columns of Charlie Hebdo Weekly. And he wasn't alone in it. He wasn't alone in it at all. Nigel Farage, who is a member of the European Parliament, he blamed immigrants for the attacks and said that it could be blamed on, and here is a quote, a really rather gross policy of multiculturalism, end quote. This was said, obviously, without the poetic intent. And Farge is apparently unaware that having one culture is exactly what the shooters, or terrorists, or extremists, or whatever you want to call them, thought was best as well. The two talking points made by these men complement each other nicely. You know, don't criticize religion, and there needs to be only one culture. It sounds alarmingly like the probable talking points of the shooters. The solution to the threat of domination by one culture and one religion cannot be the domination of another culture and another religion. Extremists don't need any excuses. And that's what, I'm probably going to butcher his name, so I apologize, but that's what Stéphane Charbonnier, I apologize. He said, that was his quote, extremists don't need any excuses. And that may be true, but it seems that extremists will excuse each other when the times demand it. And in other news or current events, maybe this is, we talked about in episode 001 about House Resolution 758 and how America is going to end up at war on the borders of Ukraine with Russia and the devastating effects that will have on the United States economy and possibly the total collapse of the American dollar and the economy itself. And this source is from Reuters.com, where an airport in Ukraine, in Donetsk, seems to be attacked. There were loud explosions and artillery fire that really rocked the Donetsk airport in eastern Ukraine on Monday. You could also see a live feed. There's a YouTube link where you can get a live feed of one of the cameras that are looking at the airport, and you could actually watch these kind of things taking place. A Reuters reporter near the strategically important airport saw flashes of artillery fire in several places and heard frequent blasts and new clashes between the pro-Russian rebels and government forces, despite the truce that they agreed on September 5th, 2014. A separatist leader named Andrei Pergin said on Sunday that the rebels had reached an agreement with the Ukrainian forces to stop shelling around the Donetsk airport, which both Ukrainian and rebel forces lay partial claim to. But a military spokesperson in Kiev said the agreement was meant only to allow the rebels to recover the dead and wounded from the airport, and that fighting had abated overnight. And the quote from spokesperson Vladislav Selanyov was, quote, "Now I understand. They have sorted out the corpses and I have started shooting again." And each side accuses the other of violating the ceasefire, and the situation in the east has deteriorated since the rebels held leadership elections on November 2nd, a vote that Kiev and the west said was a violation of the ceasefire deal. Kiev responded by saying it would no longer fund the rebel-held areas and accusing Russia of sending in troops and tanks to support the separatists, as a charge that Moscow obviously denies. The European Union foreign ministers were meeting in Brussels to discuss how to respond to the November 2nd elections, and officials said they may agree to impose personal sanctions on more rebels, but were unlikely to take new steps against Russia, on which it has imposed several rounds of sanctions. Ukraine and the West say the separatists could be about to launch a new offensive, echoing a similar accusation the rebels have leveled at the pro-Western government forces. And Ukrainian military spokesman Andriy Lysenko told reporters in Kiev that 6 servicemen had been killed in the past 24 hours and listed several other exchanges of artillery fire with the rebels. The rebels gave no details whatsoever of new casualties in a conflict that has killed more than 4,000 people since the rebels rose up in mid-April, a month after Russia responded to the overthrow of a Moscow-backed president in Kiev by annexing the Crimea region. And while we're on the topic of thousands of people being killed, we are going to now move into, and this is devastating, we're going to go into what's going on with, there's 2,000 people killed in Nigeria, which is the onslaught of Boko Haram's latest attack, and reports are saying that this is the deadliest one yet. That's what the Amnesty says. And Boko Haram, the extremist Islamic group that wants to enforce Sharia law across Nigeria, has inflicted mass casualties in northeast Nigeria. And some reports put the number of fatalities as high as 2,000. Amnesty International, communicating with experts on the ground in Nigeria, has said the assault on the town of Baga could be the deadliest attack that Boko Haram has inflicted upon their people since it surfaced in 2009. Those were reports coming from Daniel Iyer. I don't know if I'm saying his name right either, and I apologize if I'm just butchering all these names. Daniel Iyer, he's a Nigeria researcher for Amnesty International. That is the source for that. And Amnesty International has quoted some sources that say the town has been, razed with as many as 2,000 people killed. And if that's true, that would mark an extremely high amount of casualties as they push these people back, just slaughtering them as they tried to flee away from this. They tried to hold their ground, but they couldn't. Here's a guy, his name is Yane Grema. He's a 38-year-old fisherman in Nigeria, and he was part of a citizens militia to defend the town, but the extremist Islamic group overpowered them. And Grema told AFP and from the Borno state, capital of Maiduguri. It wasn't until later that he discovered the scale of the attack, and he said, Mike Omeri, a Nigerian government spokesman, said the military on Friday was battling the insurgents around Baga, where the fundamentalist Islamic group seized a major military base last week. Oman said in a statement, as quoted by AP, although officials are still in the process of securing the town and attending the wounded, early accounts indicate most of the victims were the elderly and the children who were unable to escape the town after the assault began. We've seen tweets going out, about this. I'm going into it in that kind of detail because it just didn't seem to be covered by the corporate media the way I feel it should have been. And this isn't to undermine what we were talking about earlier with the Charlie Hebdo attacks, but mainstream media did cover that in some detail, not right away, but that's kind of a given. They do have to double source things, get things confirmed before they could put them on a television screen in front of millions of people. But we see the tweets going out, and here's one from Piers Morgan. It said Boko Haram massacred more than 2,000 people in Nigeria this week. They're not Muslims. They're genocidal monsters. And he's absolutely right about that. This isn't... these guys are just maniacs murdering in the name of religion. My argument would be that I don't think that they don't seem to be very religious at all. Because most of these religions seem to kind of live a life of obedience and civility and some kind of moral center and moral value of being able to uphold one another. That said, it is usually in the fear of a God that overlooks kind of every aspect and every second of their life. Muhammad Abba, he's a Gava, he's a spokesman for poorly armed civilians in a defense group that fights Boko Haram, told the Associated Press, and according to the Washington-based Council of Foreign Relations, the 5-year insurgency claimed the lives of more than 10,000 people in 2014 alone. The violence has displaced more than 1 million Nigerians, while hundreds of thousands have escaped in neighboring Chad and Cameroon. And as just a quick final segment, we're going to talk about, here's some positive news. What's the name of this thing? What are you calling it, Obama? Obama has made a proposal where you can get 2 years of free community college. President Barack Obama said Thursday of last week that he will propose offering Americans 2 years of free community college for free if they are, quote, willing to work for it. Obama made the announcement in a short video from Air Force One saying his plan will make community college accessible for everyone. The news came as a part of a kind of like a 3-state tour to preview his State of the Union address, and Obama made a more formal announcement in Tennessee on Friday. Obama said that a world-class education begins with children, but that adults also need training, which it may be one of the truest statements that he's said in the past 7 years. Because it is true. Obviously, we need to educate our upcoming youth and evolve into more intellectual beings and get out of this continuous cycle of the dumbing down of America. So it does start as a future plan to educate the youth, but what about the adults who are just screwing things up for the youth now? Maybe we can educate the adults, we can start to make a difference. So the White House said the America's College Promise, which was the name of the proposal, said that the proposal could save eligible students upwards of $3,800 annually in tuition. And it added that if all 50 states choose to implement the president's plan, it could benefit roughly 9 million students each year. Under this proposal, students would be able to earn half of a bachelor's degree or learn technical skills needed in a workforce or some kind of trade. And students would be required to maintain a 2.5 GPA and make progress towards completing their program, to which I would have to say, if you can't maintain a 2.5 GPA in a community college, you probably shouldn't be in school. Maybe that's not your thing. Or maybe you just need to push yourself a little harder, get a little more committed, and put the time in. If it's free, hey, I might try it. I can't afford college. But if this goes into play, all 50 states choose to implement this America's College Promise proposal, that might be something on the table. Maybe I go for a lot of you guys know me from the Pittsburgh music scene and things like that, and maybe I go and I get a degree in musical sciences and start teaching music as well as performing. Or maybe I go get a degree in journalism or broadcasting. That's something that could put a real thing on the table for me. So I'm looking at it with a close eye, and I hope that you guys are too, because Congress would have to approve funding for 3/4 of the average cost of community college, with participating states contributing the remaining funds to eliminate tuition fees for students in the first 2 years, which could mean a raise in some kind of tax. You'll probably, if this does play out, and I ain't gonna lie, I hope that it does, you will see a slight increase there in the school taxes that you currently pay. So I hope you guys are looking forward to all that, as well as looking forward to episode number 003, where we continue on our journey of the Rant Podcast. And before we close this thing out, I wanted to just open up a place for some feedback. And again, anything that you would have to say about this podcast or transmission, you could please do so. If it's on Twitter, just do it in a retweet or a reply. On Facebook or YouTube, just go ahead and comment in the comment section below. We greatly appreciate your feedback and your questions or your debate. Or if you want to rip me apart, that's good too. That's why we support freedom of speech and expression here at the Rant Podcast. But what the announcement is I have been talking to a couple of guys and girls alike about getting some guests on, and it seems to be that we want to take things. We kind of have this Wednesday morning kind of roundup. We usually aim for around the half-hour mark, just like a quick roundup in informational detail from some sources about big topics that aren't properly covered by corporate media. But we also want to be able to talk to people, and sometimes have a couple of people on the podcast and some speak a little more open and a little more freely, and get a little more opinionated, still based on the facts, but also drawing outside perspective other than just myself. And what we're going to try to aim for is to go for more of like a Friday night prime time type of situation. If it was television, that's what it would be called. I don't know what else to refer to it as. To where on Friday night we'll have a podcast also that's called The Flip Side, brought to you by the Rant Podcast, where we get a little more open and speak a little more freely, and really exercise our freedom of expression on some of the same big topics that we go over on the daytime side of things here Wednesday morning with the Rant Podcast. So feel free to give us your opinion on that. If you have some topics or ideas or things, or maybe some news that you think I'm missing that corporate media is also missing, please feel free to put all that stuff in the comments section below. And tune in to us next week as we bring to you episode number 003 of the Rant Podcast. Until next time, I'm your host, Nick Callahan, signing off for the Rant Podcast. So until the next episode, go be free, bunch of savages.